Welcome to the next episode of the Bravo Zulu live stream series. We're waiting now for a sort of audience to join. We'll see you all come in as you join. Bit of a reminder to people, the recordings of this go out across all of our YouTube channels, Facebook, LinkedIn, and you can get the audio podcast version on Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you listen to your podcasts. So search for Bravo Zulu on probably YouTube where you're podcasting and press subscribe, and you'll get notified of new shows. Now, one of the big things about this live stream and doing it live is you can ask questions as we're going. So this really is live. We're doing this on the fly, and as questions come in, they'll appear here on the right hand side of the screen, and we're able to answer your questions as we go. So just to ask a question, just comment on the YouTube video, comment on Facebook below this post, comment on LinkedIn below the post, and these questions will come up here. So do ask questions, they come in live. So today I'm delighted to have on the show Beep Doctors, and Beep Doctors are based in Cumbria in the UK. And joining me today is Dr. Chris Moss. So Chris, hello and welcome.
Very good afternoon, good evening, good day, wherever you are in the world.
Yeah, exactly. What I'm going to do here, Chris, is I always introduce geographically where people are coming in from. So let me open up a map here. We'll take a look. Okay, super. So obviously, if you're familiar with people coming in here now watching from the US, it's just hit breakfast time in New Zealand, Australia. So here we go. And we're all the way around here in the UK. And Chris, you might talk us through here. We're going into the Lake District kind of area.
So this is one of the national parks in the United Kingdom, and we are right bang in the middle of one of the largest national parks, the Lake District, beautiful part of the UK.
Lovely. So it's sort of
I think
this area. Oh, look at that. There's a
and actually, if you just hold on just there, I think it's worth saying that it's a tremendously amazing area, and you can kind of see it's quite mountainous right across. And so it presents huge challenges looking after people in some really remote parts of the United Kingdom.
Excellent. I assume, you can see here from the road network, obviously it's quite hard to get east to west or west to east across it, I assume too. You've got to go around the mountains.
You can either walk across them or you fly across them, or indeed you can walk, and there's some fantastic routes.
Excellent. So you've got a team of doctors who are volunteers, Beep Doctors. Tell us a little bit about what that is and how it operates.
So Beep Doctors was set up 25 years ago by Dr. Theo Weston in a small place called, and you'll see on the map on the M6, Penrith. And the GP there set it up to really help and support accidents and incidents on the M6. And that was 25 years ago. Mm-hmm. Now, since then, the charity has expanded, and we now cover the whole of Cumbria, responding to any sort of major incident or any support that the ambulance service require from a medical point of view. And you can see there some of the areas we cover really are quite geographically remote. And I guess one of the questions people often ask is, what does BEEP actually stand for? Well, again, when it first started 25 years ago, it was bringing emergency equipment to Burbeck.
Okay.
That is a tiny little place up in Penrith, but we've now sort of changed that and developed that. And BEEP is part of Basics UK, which is the British Association of Pre-Hospital Care. And we are one of the little smaller charities in Cumbria that support
that. So what happens? How do you get called out? And then when you're called out, what do you send? What do you bring to a scene? What's the resourcing?
So I think that's a really interesting question on tasking. The way our tasking works is someone will phone 999 mm-hmm. and they'll automatically generate a certain code depending what they tell the dispatcher. Now, if that code is generated and it forms one of the codes that we respond to, we get an automatic text message That will then allow us to then phone the control room, so ambulance control, which is across the whole of the Northwest Ambulance Service. So for the viewers not in the UK, that's right down from Manchester all the way up to the Scottish border. And we'll then liaise with them to decide whether they need added assistance, so whether it's just a paramedic response or whether you need also a medical response. So that's one way we can be tasked. The other way we can be tasked is maybe a crew arrival on scene and actually it didn't get coded correctly because of what the caller said. And so it could then potentially be a crew request, and then we would respond. So going back to the first one, if you get a tasking from a page, you would then obviously phone control. And while we're discussing with the dispatch team, the caller is still ongoing with what's going on with the incident.
Sure.
And so we might then start responding, and we'll get updates along the way. Personally, we like to respond as soon as we can, and it's better to be stood down than wait and then decide to get stood up.
Absolutely.
So it's always best to send more resource and then just back off as opposed to doing it the other way.
Better to look at it than look for it. That's what we'd say, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the other thing that you mentioned is, what do we sort of like provide? Well, there's 15 of us right across Cumbria, and we respond in either marked up cars, which are all charity funded, or our own cars, which are also funded, and bring that enhanced level of care for, be it drugs, be it procedures, or indeed just be it an extra situational awareness.
And so to go back to that even initial tasking, the NHS for viewers not in the UK is the National Health Service, and they're running the ambulance service, right? And so someone rings into goes to a medical control room or of some type, or an ambulance control room, and have they sort of geo-fenced Cumbria? Is that fair to say that it's an automatic text you get?
So it's an amazing system. So a call, someone will ring in on the call, and that call gets taken by a call handler. And as soon as we've got a information as to exactly where that is, either postcode or grid reference, that if it's within our area and it's also within the correct coding, which happens automatically on the computer system, we would then get a text message, and then we can then liaise with the dispatch team. So you've got two teams within the ambulance. You've got the call handlers that are constantly on the phone to the people taking those 999 calls, or for the Americans, the what's in America,
911.
911, yeah. So either 911 or 999 calls, and they'll be the call handlers will be taking that while the dispatch team are working out the resources. So we work with the air desk and the trauma desk within dispatch, where they look at some more complicated jobs and exactly what sort of resources they might need. And you can imagine some of the issues up in the mountains, either with the adventure sports that go on, or with some of the roads, endless cycle accidents. There's 101 things that can potentially go wrong and need some more complex resource.
So you've got the call taker sitting there in their headset. They're on talking to the person in distress or somebody at the scene, and they're answering a set sort of questions which is giving the call a priority and code through. What codes are you activated for? So there's some obvious ones there, I can assume, like cardiac arrest or breathing or choking. I mean, how far down do your team get?
So I think it's really interesting. As soon as someone phones 999, then you get through which service do you require, and then you get through to the ambulance service. That call taker has an absolute script, and they cannot deviate from the script. So no matter who you are, whether you're a doctor, a layperson, a surgeon, whatever you are, they will always ask, is the patient breathing? And they literally have a very, very clear script, because that automatically codes as to where we need to go with the job. So there's a huge number of different codes depending on whether it's a road traffic accident, an amputation, any sort of trauma. And you're right, we respond to certain cardiac arrests and then major trauma, and any incident such as a fall where there is potential to have more complicated injuries. And again, equally, the dispatcher thinks, well, hang on a minute, this might be coded incorrectly. We can still then get tasked from that. So the system works really well. It's either automatic through coding, or the air desk and the trauma desk will pick things up and will look at the jobs, and then they can allocate us, or indeed a crew can also then call in. And what you've got to remember is Northwest Ambulance Services, who we respond for, we get tasked through, they can have up to 500 incidents at any one time. So the dispatch is a hugely complicated process, which I think a lot of people don't really know a huge amount about.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's amazing how the two teams are operating in there. Someone talking to the caller and other people organizing what goes where. There's a first question in here. It's from Nico. Works in the control room of New Zealand Coast Guard. I know Nico, and so it's obviously Nico. It is 8:11 a.m. Thanks for joining us on the stream. So Nico's wondering, in that text message, what details do you get?
So yeah, that's a really good question. They keep the text message very short, and we'll get a location, and normally that is both a postcode but also a grid reference. And then we get the code that it's being coded as. So you kind of get to know what the codes are, and you get a very short description as to what the actual incident is. So it might say explosion, female, 30, not breathing, and that's and then it gives you the job reference. So we can then, whenever we radio in or we phone in, then we've also got that job reference. So quite often, even just the other day, I phoned in with a job reference. It was an RTC 3-person, and then it had also said 1-person CPR in progress. And then we phoned in, and we can soon get a lot more information, because what you have to remember, a lot of people will phone up and panic, and it might get coded incorrectly. So as soon as we do a bit of caller interrogation, so yes, we'll interrogate the dispatch just to make sure that actually there is some sort of incident that requires further medical support, and then we would go. And the dispatch team might say, well, we're not too sure, we're still on the call, would you mind starting to roll? And then we'll update you on the way. And that works really, really well. So they will add us into the job, and then we'll start responding. And we'll also then find out where other resources are. Because again, being the remote area we're at, whether we've got single crewed ambulance, whether we've got other rapid response vehicles, and we can also liaise with search and rescue and the air desk as to what other air assets are potentially coming if it's going to be a complicated issue.
So I was going to ask that. What are your comms then as you're on once you're moving?
So we have airwave sets, which is how the police, fire and ambulance work in the UK. It currently goes off the O2 network. I believe that is potentially going to be changing in the next 18 months or so, but it does tend to work okay, although we do have issues in certain parts of the lakes with the mountains with poor reception, but that's across all areas with police, fire and ambulance. So once we can either respond with our phone, or equally we can just go straight through to the control via the airwaves, which works really well, because in a major incident you all get put onto the same channel. And I think that's something really important to mention. If we're then responding to an event that potentially you've got a drive time of 25 minutes and you're on your own in the car, you can actually get a really good idea by the time you arrive of exactly what's going on, because you get put onto that open channel and you can kind of hear from control who's on the ground, and you get an idea of what you need to do for when you arrive.
And so people not familiar with airwaves, it's a digital radio network, cell based, I think, isn't it? So
that's correct.
Yeah, so you can hear equally anywhere, no matter where you are in the country. You could effectively hear the same conversation.
Yeah, and I think that's the amazing thing. Like, I can phone up someone on an air ambulance anywhere in the country, providing I know their PIN. So although it's a radio, it kind of also operates exactly as a mobile phone. You can do point to point, you can do point to group, and then you can do open channel. So it works really, really well.
Excellent. What do you have to do to get access to that communications network? Is that part of being basics, or how does that approval work?
Yeah, well, again, I think some of the governance is super complicated. We have a memorandum of understanding with Basics Northwest, because the Northwest Ambulance Service, there's a number of basic schemes. And so we, rather than Northwest Ambulance Service having to speak to all the different schemes, we have one overarching Northwest basics, and we have a memorandum of understanding that goes through them. And then the ambulance service supply radios, and obviously there's the sign-off procedure as well, because obviously it's a data protection point of view. But we like to use the radios because obviously everything is recorded, which has huge implications should you attend a major incident and you need to then sort of look back over it.
So there's a question here, Mark Mullen, who I think is York Rescue. They use Zello, which is if you're familiar or people aren't familiar, Zello is it's a mobile phone app you can put on your smartphone or your iPhone or Android, and it works a little bit like a digital radio through the cell phone network. I believe you can connect it up then to actual handheld radios too, and a lot of people do that. But it kind of goes over the internet radio. So once you've got an internet connection, it works very much like that. It's a very good app. I think Zello became famous from the Cajun Navy, which were the sort of thousands of volunteers who descended on Hurricane Katrina in the US. So they got known as the Cajun Navy because there wasn't the help from the federal government in the US for Katrina. And so they came in with all their boats and swamp boats, hovercrafts, all of that came in and rescued people in Katrina. And I think Zello is what they used, and it got quite a big following from it.
I think comms is so important. And I mean, we have problems in the lakes with signal and definitely problems with 3G, 4G, and definitely no 5G here. And it's when you're on a job and you're maxed out with your bandwidth. And then because we're trying to communicate with the air desk, with the ambulance service, if you've got a complicated issue and potentially you might need ECMO and you're having to deal with hospital communications, we try and keep comms as simple as possible. Otherwise, things can go horribly wrong. And I'm sure we've all been involved in jobs where it's always a communication issue. And because we're dealing with multi-agency incidents with police, fire, ambulance, you've got mountain rescue, you've got a huge number of different people. We've got to be really careful about how we communicate. So the airwaves tends to work really well until you have no reception.
So there's another question in here from York Rescue Boat. Are you a volunteer with Beep, and what's your normal job?
Yeah, and again, I think that's this is an amazing thing across the whole of the UK. The number of volunteers that either do the lifeboats, the mountain rescue. Beep is a 100% voluntary charity. We relied solely on donations. Probably cost around £250,000 to £300,000 a year that's raised, and then all the doctors within the organisation are all pre-hospital trained. That either work in critical care, intensive anaesthetics or emergency care, or they're potentially a GP that's got a lot of pre-hospital experience. But yeah, it's incredible that all these organisations rely solely on volunteers. But the amount of hours that goes in, it's roughly, I think we probably have around sort of 400 to 500 of volunteering hours per month. So it's a huge commitment.
So before that text messages come in, do you forward that message out to the rest of the team members somehow, or is there a duty person who rings, or how do you alert your team? Am I right in saying 14 doctors? Or
yes, there's 14 active doctors. They're fairly well spread across Cumbria, and we have our own WhatsApp group that works really well. Try and work out how we coordinate, because the last thing you want is everyone phoning control, because you then have the communication overload. It's something that we're still working on. Luckily, I'm based down in the South Lakes, where we've only got a couple of the doctors, and it works really well between us. But yes, I think the task from that point of view, having one person that oversees and coordinates is really important. And we're looking at how we progress that, because year on year, the organisation's just getting busier.
I mean, it's crazy how many response organizations, and not volunteer ones, but general response organizations, are running on WhatsApp. It's truly amazing. The WhatsApp live location share is used by more response teams than I use anything else. It's just simple and works for them.
I mean, it's incredible. Like, even though WhatsApp, it seems to be used more than what's 3 words as well.
Yeah. Absolutely. Okay, so you would, the message comes into somebody's got a duty phone of some type, and they're putting out in a WhatsApp group, this is the call, we copy and paste, this is what we have, who can go. Is that what I'm understanding?
Yeah, so absolutely, and then or someone will phone control and then get the update, because what we don't want is more than 1 or 2 people attending the
Yeah.
scene. I mean, we're quite lucky because of the way we've selected the medical team. Actually, they're quite well spread out throughout Cumbria,
Yeah.
but sometimes a job will require more than sort of 1 or 2. I was at one a couple of months back, which was a fairly big major incident. And actually we had 3 people, and we had people come from all over the county to come and support. But that's the trick, is you don't want to overload, and you want to add value at the scene. And sometimes actually the main thing that we do is to add a bit of clinical input. The paramedics these days are fantastically well trained, and sometimes they just need a bit of extra support. And if we can be there to help prevent someone going to hospital, or to provide that extra urgent intervention that is outside of their skill mix, then that is great for patient care.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm going to pull up your webpage here. So we're looking here. Okay, so you've got a fleet of vehicles then as well, or a number of vehicles, is that right?
Well, so that's interesting, actually, because we started 25 years ago, and we had a Land Rover and literally drove it into the ground. And then we're without for a couple of years, and people responding in their own cars. But that doesn't really work particularly very well for some of the remote locations that we have to get to. And equally, even if we're involved in things on the M6, so that's the big motorway, being in an unmarked car isn't ideal.
Yeah.
So we've started now. We've got XC1, which is our first car, which was amazingly donated by Smart Metering Services down south, and we've got a great relationship with them. And we're looking at expanding the fleet, so we'll have 10 cars over Cumbria that can then help and respond. So we've, in fact, hopefully we're about to get over the line another 3 in the next couple of weeks, which would be fantastic.
Brilliant.
And we're looking at a business that then sponsors the car, and we then do a lot of work with them from a marketing point of view. The beauty of being in the lakes is the cinematography is fantastic, and the great pictures that you can see.
So a single doctor will normally go from home in the car. They'll have the car with them.
So yeah, it depends. At the weekends and things, that we can actually crew up a car, depending on how busy the ambulance service are. We have been known to crew up cars and help and support, but the cars are kind of based strategically around Cumbria.
Okay, and within the car, then you've got your radio comms, you've the blue lights on the roof. It's all marked up.
So it's a fully branded up car. All the doctors that we have within the organisation are blue light trained, and for those in the UK, there's obviously a huge change in the law coming in with Section 19. We're waiting with bated breath to see how that will change the driving. But yeah, no, it makes a huge difference being in a marked up car. And indeed, what do we then provide? Well, actually, it's a full response car that has the ability to, it has a ventilator on board. We have, state-of-the-art monitoring. There's all of the medication. So we can actually provide a huge amount of high-end care at the roadside. Excellent. Or lakeside.
So there's a question in here about air ambulances responding in cars now as well as helicopters, which I think is quite common, that they might have a ground crew as well. So asking, how do you work alongside these teams? What is the air ambulance that covers Cumbria?
Yeah, so that's a really good question. So the air ambulance that covers Cumbria, so you've got the Northwest Air Ambulance, and then you've got GNAS, the Great North Air Ambulance. So we've got one that's based just outside of Cumbria in the south in Blackpool, and then GNAS, which is based in just outside of Penrith. And I think a lot of people ask, how do we work together? Well, actually, it works really well from a tasking point of view. The helicopter can fly during daylight, and you can just imagine in Cumbria with some of the inclement weather, quite often the helicopter can't actually fly. So we provide that added service there, and equally during the evenings when they're not flying, we've obviously got that service there. They've just started providing night cover from a car response. And again, that's just on a Friday, Saturday night, and that works really well. But obviously the car is based in a certain area. And you can just imagine trying to get to certain areas by car becomes hugely complicated. But yes, the Great North Air Ambulance do have a car, and we work closely alongside them. And indeed, a lot of our medical team also work for the air ambulance as well as volunteering for basics.
Okay, excellent. So we're kind of in our storyline. We've got the car on the road. It's arriving up. Is there a difference in, first off, equipment that you bring compared to the ambulance service? I'm sure there's a difference in drugs, medications, but physical equipment, is there anything different?
So obviously we've got our own kit bags, and I think certain things for certain procedures, we'll have extra procedural stuff. Either if you're doing, say an amputation or other invasive procedures, we also have more comprehensive ventilators, and we've just had an amazing donation of a brand new. We've got 7 brand new state-of-the-art Schiller Touch 7s, which, having done a huge amount of research of looking at what sort of monitor is going to be the best for a pre-hospital organisation. These monitors, they're French-made, and they're absolutely fantastic. They hands down win over everything else on the market.
Describe for people what a monitor will do.
So a monitor will monitor, well, it literally monitors a patient's vital signs. These monitors that we've got can also monitor someone's breathing, so their CO2. You can do your invasive blood pressures or your non-invasive blood pressures. And then it also acts as a defibrillator as well. So you can also shock someone through the monitor. Indeed, if your heart's in a funny rhythm, you can also pop them on and paste them. So they are fantastic bits of kit. Really lightweight, and they can actually go within the bag. And a couple of our teams that are on mountain rescue also integrate this within their rescue pack. So fantastic bits of kit.
I see if I've got the right one here. You can tell me if this is the right.
Yeah, that's the Schiller Touch 7. Absolutely fantastic. And you can actually take the ends off that, and it sits really nicely within a bag. And the way we've done it, again, from a clinical governance side of things, because gone are the days where you can get these charities that just do what they want. Any volunteer organisation still has to meet all of the Care Quality Commission, all the governance structures. So we now have all of those that are linked back to our main server at our base. So we can see anything straight away on any computer anywhere in the world. So if someone's a bit remote with a slightly difficult ECG, then we can pull that up on any computer. So it's a tremendous system.
Excellent. I can see Andy Graham here. Andy is in Washington State in the US. So 11:30 a.m. Andy's just suggesting here, it looks like a Life Pack 15. I don't know if you know the similarities or.
Do you know, that's funny. I can guarantee, Andy, it's nothing like a Life Pack 15. It is far, far superior. And the ability that monitor has.
What's the difference, though, Chris? Like when you're saying it's superior for people?
Well, I guess from a usability point of view, it's really, really easy to use. It's quick. I remember when I first got one out, there's no complications with it. It is touchscreen light. Night and day settings work really well. It's very clear. It's very simple to use. But above all, from a rescue point of view, it's much, much smaller, much more compact than the Life Pack 15.
Okay, excellent. And then in terms of procedures there, you've kind of hinted at some of them through the equipment. And you were telling me, the paramedics and the care that's already there in pre-hospital is excellent. And you're coming in with this extra layer of capability or advice or, the ability maybe to not send somebody into hospital. So where can you give some examples for people who are not medics of what that is? What does that look like?
Yeah, well, I think even taking it back a step further, when we go back to that map of the UK and we looked at Cumbria, in the United Kingdom, we've got trauma centres. So that's for hospitals that deal with all these major issues. So our major trauma centres are either in Newcastle or in Preston. So a flight time to those, you'd quite happily be sort of 30, 40 minutes. By road, we're talking hours. So now imagine you're in a really remote part of, Cumbria, and you've got a problem. Now, paramedics can do certain things. They have certain skill sets and certain drugs But then if you need to get to a major trauma centre, you are a long way. And so we then help and facilitate that with the air ambulances and with search and rescue. And potentially you might need extra drugs, you might need extra procedural management before you actually get to that trauma centre. But the key is working really closely with our paramedic colleagues, search and rescue colleagues, and the team on the air desk and the air ambulances.
Yeah, excellent. So at that incident, to prepare for that incident, as a team of doctors, what do you need training in? What, like, do you as a charity, as a team, meet regularly and train together, or is that?
So we meet every month, and we've got training every month. We review all the cases, any complicated cases we review. But you can't just be a doctor and think you're going to do pre-hospital care, much like I wouldn't just think I was going to do neurosurgery. Like it's a subspecialty unto itself. So we're very careful who we actually take onto the team, and then we have ongoing training. I think that's really important. I think gone are the days where people think they can just give it a go, because actually it's become, in the UK and across the world, it's become a subspecialty of medicine as well, and of paramedicine as well. And rightly so. You want to be tracked by the right person, making the correct clinical decisions. And that's exactly the same. If you broke a bone, you wouldn't want to be tracked by a cardiologist. So, that's exactly the same from a pre-hospital setting as well.
Excellent. There's a question in there from Philip Stewart. Philip's in Ireland. Philip is part of the Coast Guard in Ireland. Would BEEP volunteers train with other services that you would work beside on incidents? So I guess joint training exercises with the other services.
I think joint training is so important, and it's interesting you mentioned that. I've got a meeting with the Chief Fire Officer in Cumbria next week, and we're looking at how we can sort of develop and do more inter-service work. And I think that is so important, not just training amongst our medical team, but also we want to train with a paramedic team. Now, that's been hugely complicated during COVID, because there's just not enough paramedics, and the workload is huge, and they can't even get their own training done. But I think it is really, really important to train, especially multi-services where you have complicated issues, complicated communication. So that is something that we're really looking to develop, is our training with both fire, police, and the ambulance service, mountain rescue, and the base search and rescue, and other rescue organisations within the UK or within the Lake District National Park.
Excellent. So you'd be part of these training exercises. Is there any certain qualifications, or people come in, you're selecting them as a doctor, and for their because they're a registered doctor and because they've got experience already in the area, or they volunteer themselves for that, are there any required certificates or anything beyond that people must have?
So we're doing a huge project at the moment looking at certification, training, and validation. There's the diploma in immediate medical care and the fellowship of immediate medical care, which the diploma is really a baseline for anyone that's doing pre-hospital work. And equally, there's now pre-hospital training schemes in the UK, which I think are also really important, and are producing some really high-end doctors. We do have some medical teams that have obviously got grandfather rights, and they've been doing it for many years and bring a huge wealth and experience. But again, we expect everyone to keep up to date with training, responding to jobs. I see there is someone's asked a question about the number of jobs that we do. I mean, last year, just to give you an idea, we had 300 call-outs within the year. So between 14 of us, that's a huge number of jobs that we're sort of responding to. And it's roughly sort of 1,000, or maybe just less than 1,000-ish hours a month of voluntary time across the medical and our administration team.
It's lots. Excellent. Well, I know you guys as well. Obviously, how we know each other is you're fairly new D4H users. I think you came on in the last year, is that right?
It was interesting. I joined BEEP a couple of years ago, and we were kind of looking at how we did the documentation and some of our CRM management. And there's all sorts of systems out there. We came across D4H, which was recommended by our partners organisation just down in Cheshire, and they use it to great effect. And so we started to look at it, and I must admit, it has totally revolutionized the way that we're not only recording and documenting jobs, but also managing all our equipment and also managing all of our personnel. So kind of as we sort of alluded to earlier, the issues of making sure that we're all up to date and current, D4H really does allow for that and has totally revolutionized everything we're doing. Now, we've also worked really closely with another local IT company, Logic, who are based in Carlisle, who have very kindly donated all of our IT infrastructure, including all of our iPads, where D4H now sits on that. So when you're out doing jobs, it's very easy to access a huge amount of information. They link up to our monitors. They also link up to all of our ultrasounds. So everything can happen with, if you like, this new integrated ecosystem, which is what we're kind of really trying to pioneer here in the Lakes, is how we get everything integrated and also make sure you've got full documentation.
Excellent. Well, I'm going to ask you only two questions about D4H because I don't want to spend too long on it. And they're going to be, what's your favorite part? And then have you any suggestions for things we change? Now, we talked earlier just before the call started about one of governance and viewing things, but we'll go to that. But before we do, is there a favorite part that you'd highlight for people who haven't tried it?
Do you know, I think one of the things with D4H, obviously, as we said, that we're covering sort of 300 jobs a year. Before we started D4H, it was difficult to have that accountability between the medical team to find out what was going on. And the great thing is now is any of us can log on to D4H. We can see what jobs have happened in the region, and then we can look, we can learn, and we can then sort of challenge and reflect and review. And it kind of allows for a real open culture on how we look at jobs, and our documentation for jobs has definitely it's massively increased. And it also, from a learning point of view, it's great to see how other people are managing jobs as well.
Do people enter the job themselves when they return?
The beauty of having all these iPads is it actually sits like a ePRF system. So people will actually, even within the car or while the patient is in the ambulance being prepped for transport, we can then get everything across and get it all done. And so that works really well. So I think that's one of the real challenges, is how do we manage our system within the ambulance system? And we've done all sorts of work about how we do that. The problem with the new ePRF systems, the electronic patient records that the ambulance have, is only one person can ever access the records. So we've come up with the system that we put everything onto D4H. We can quite happily forward a copy. We can take photos. But you have to remember that even before our records are being made, quite often the patient's already left scene. So it kind of works really well that we add our records. We can then email them on if we need to. And that works really, really well. I mean, the other great thing is all the stock management. So if we've used drugs, that they're all recorded within D4H, and that is allocated to that job. It helps with a cost point of view, but also I have the beauty of being the drug officer. And so I end up trying to work out how we're going to get all the drugs and manage that side of things. But I can log on and can see exactly what our stock level is or what it's going to be, because people have already booked out the drugs before they take them. So it's really helped us from a drug wastage point of view to make sure that we don't have excess medication.
That's great to hear. So before we came on air, you mentioned to me, or you were asking, just while you had my ear, I'm the right person to ask, about governance and viewing records. So you were pointing out to me that there's no ability we can't track who can view, you can't track who's viewed a record, only if who's changed a record. And that maybe you'd explain why that's useful to people.
Yeah, I mean, so the record management is great, and you can see exactly when anyone logs on, if they change something, that's fantastic. I think what we were wanting also to look at is who can access a record. In the UK's point of view, the GDPR, so those are regulations that manage data governance within the UK. It's really important that we have really clear access, that people only access data if they need to see it. And I think that would be a real fantastic development within D4H, is if you can have not just a change access system, but also a view access system, so we can see exactly who's looking at the records, which I think would really improve the system.
Yeah, I completely agree. And it's something we'll look at doing. It's very, very easy for us to do. So there's no difficulty in that. But we haven't had many requests for it. So it's good. I like hearing new things. Is there anything else that you think would I put out on Twitter and LinkedIn I think it was around January 1st. If we could build anything in 2022, what should it be? Have you any suggestions for that? Is there anything you browse around and you go, this is missing something?
Do you know, I think the system is unbelievably comprehensive, and I think, like a lot of IT, quite often it's not used to the maximum. So we've got a medical student, Tom, who's done a huge amount of work and is quite IT savvy about trying to make sure everything is on there. So getting all the equipment, getting everything on. Our biggest problem is making sure all the doctors are fully au fait with booking things out and not just taking stuff from stock cupboards, because that totally changes things. And if anyone out there tries to manage a group of doctors, we must be the worst group to try and actually manage and coordinate. So the system works really well. We're still looking at potentially how we can develop it. I mean, the one thing that I would love to see is, all the barcoding, and there is elements in there for how we can really quickly sort of to manage things. I think from a job point of view, because obviously it's a SaaS system as well as a medical system, it would be great to be able to see a bit more about drug administration to a particular patient. So we've added our own little columns in there, but it would be really good to kind of add that in, because again, from an audit clinical governance point of view, we could then see exactly when drugs were being given and at what time. So we do that in free text, but I think it becomes slightly harder to do if you're going to search for it.
So when you say that, is that on the persons involved page? You're saying not just marking the trauma up, that you'd have a timeline of drug administration?
Yeah, well, I mean, all of our drugs are in the equipment section, so there's no reason why you couldn't drop down that drug. And imagine you've got, say, I don't know, a vial of morphine, 10 milligrams in a vial. You could drop that down, but you would kind of need to know how much you actually gave, and then at kind of what time as well. But again, it's about keeping it super simple and keeping communication simple. So we've got a couple of drop downs, and I've persuaded the doctors, as long as they use the front page and some of the simple resources, then we can start to add that in. So everyone knows they've got to use the basics, but then if you want to add the multi-casualties and extra information, it works really well from that point of view. And I think, there's been certain incidents recently, and thank goodness not in BEEP, but if you end up in coroner's court, it can be slightly unpleasant if you don't have really good data. So that's kind of what we're really thankful for with D4H, is actually our data quality now and timings works really well. And if you then have it with the monitor, so with our Touch 7 Schillers, we can interrogate all of that data. And again, we've set that up so we've got 20 individual codes. So when you're maxed out on scene, you can quickly, press the button, get your individual codes. And that then allows us to sort of marry up the Touch 7 data alongside. I mean, initially we wanted the Schillers to input data directly into D4H, but you can just imagine trying to get that.
And I remember the request coming in and trying to think of how we'd make it all seamless, that it wasn't over complex.
And I think that's something to say to viewers out there, that actually it's about keeping it simple, because originally we wanted the monitors to integrate all the data into D4H, but you can just imagine that we would get the wrong patient in D4H with the wrong patient in Schiller, and actually keeping the system simple has actually worked really well for us.
Yeah, absolutely. Chris, that's brilliant. Thank you very, very much for your time today. There's been great viewership of this and lots of questions coming in, which is brilliant. I can see there's a couple of people here making suggestions. Andy, classroom platform, absolutely. That has definitely passed our thinking in the last 2 years. It's something that we're debating internally. And Dale, customized reports. John, more flexible control. These are all things actually that we are talking about internally. The text pop-up that's just come on screen is about next week. I think it's in 2 weeks' time. We've got the next live stream booked. And it was to that tweet that I put out saying, what should we build in 2022? We got hundreds of replies to it, of ideas. We'd like to invite some people on this live stream. We can take 10 people on here at once, so it might be a bit of fun. we'll try and get a big group conversation going. So if you'd like to be involved in that live stream, I think Amy's going to reach out to people who've commented already and invite them on. Or if you'd like to nominate yourself, email info@d4h.com. We finally own d4h.com after 8 years of trying to buy it and bid on it. We finally got it there at Christmas. So info@d4h.com. You can get us. So if there's any, I'm watching questions here just to see if I catch anything last. Chris, is there anything I've missed or anything you'd like to say from the charity's behalf?
Well, I think on behalf of all the medical team, a massive thanks to the team at D4H. Whenever you put a new system in place, and I've been involved not just with my medical hat, with various other things that I do, and integrating new software, it can sometimes be an absolute nightmare. The team at D4H and the technicians have been phenomenal. And it's great to have that flexibility to be able to change and try and work with people. But it is a fantastic system. It's really changed how we operate. And it's not just about sort of the medical team on the ground, because we have a lot of our admin team that also use it for fundraising. I think that's something maybe we haven't really touched on, is trying to pull off data for fundraising, because the way we raise funds and all the big grant applications, we need a lot of information about the jobs we're attending, the number of people, what sort of jobs are. And so D4H really allows for that. And I know our administration team have found it has been an absolute blessing, because before D4H came about, they were chasing 14 doctors trying to work out exactly what was going on. So we now have exactly. We were on Google spreadsheets and doodle polls and all sorts of things. So it's been fantastic. So a real massive thanks to the technicians who kind of really understand what we need pre-hospital, and in a rescue situation, it works really, really well.
Brilliant, Chris. They're lovely words. Thank you very much. And thank you for your time, and I'll talk to you on the support desk, on the help desk.
Absolutely. Well, thanks very much, and a good day and a good evening and a good night to everyone around the world.
Great. Thanks again. See you all next time in about 2 weeks' time. And if you'd like to join us on the live stream, email info@d4h.com.